new age world filled with delusions and wish fulfillment by morons in need of attention. Renowned experiencers of high strangeness and podcasters Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaeni received invitations to a tropical paradise getaway called Paratopia. Little did they know, it was the same type of new age spiritual retreat they've been avoiding all their lives.
Oh, don't be shy. Zebras are God's way of laughing his race. Scrapple is a nonsensical fool. Come on, you can shake it. Yeah. Climb on my ass and scale the Grand Canyon. Anything goes at Paratopia. And welcome.
Let's see. Healing Crystal Retreat, Love Your Dolphin Daytime Swim, Tofu Wow Luau. Ooh! A stage reading of Communion, the movie, as read by Zachariah Sitchin and Angelia Joyner. It's tonight's dinner theater, Jeff! So many options!
Yeah, great. What do you want to do?
Call home. Sadly, you must get homesick, right? But with the wife and the son, must be nice coming home to all that warmth and love every night.
Yeah, it's great. That's why I came here with you instead of them.
Wait a sec, Jeff. Is that Dr. Greg Matloff, the leading expert in possibilities for interstellar propulsion and a tenured astronomy professor with the physics department of New York City College of Technology, who consults with NASA Marshall Space Flight Center, is a Hayden Associate of the American Museum of Natural History and a corresponding member of the International Academy of Astronautics, as well as co-author of Living Off the Land in Space with Les Johnson of NASA and C. Bangs, and also author of Deep Space Probes, as well as Telescope Power, More Telescope Power, The Urban Astronomer, The Starflight Handbook, which he co-authored with Eugene Malov?
Yeah, I don't know what you just said.
Sure you do! That's Dr. Matloff! The dude's papers on interstellar travel, a search for extraterrestrial artifacts, and methods of protecting Earth from asteroid impacts have been published in JBIS, Acta Astronautica, Spaceflight, Journal for Astronautical Sciences, and Mercury. His popular articles have appeared in many publications, including Analog. In 1998, he won a $5,000 prize in the International Essay Contest on ETI, sponsored by the National Institute for Discovery Sciences. Ring a bell?
Oh, yeah, that guy. Yeah, let's go say hi.
Mode of interstellar.
Hey, Greg! Dr. Greg. Remember me? You spoke at my Culture of Contact event last October.
Ah, Jeremy Vaeni and Jeffrey Ritzman. Fantastic to see you. Won't you join us for a drink? It is on the house.
I'm not thirsty, but, free drinks appeal to my food addiction. The one I've used to hide my pain since my parents divorced back in 3rd grade. They weren't in 3rd grade, I was. I was thin then, and a go-getter.
Yeah, I don't have a pathetic backstory. I just like those little umbrella things. Jer, wake up. Wake up.
Oh, Jeff!
Oh, Jeff, I just spit out my gum.
Oh, well, that was unspectacular.
What'd you think? I was choking on a pussy? Cat or something? What a gem that was, huh? It just came to me, yeah.
Yeah, great. Hey, Jer, where are we?
I guess we're still going with this. We're in Paratopia, talking about the love of family and planning our vacation without them.
Yeah, I know all that, but where are we?
Looks like a podcast booth?
Yeah, and I feel like we've been here before.
Like, in another life?
Like we were trapped here.
Yeah, vaguely. I vaguely remember us talking about something, like we were here talking about doing a podcast or something, where we'd interview people outside the field. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, and I always said I wanted to talk to a physicist.
Right, yeah, and I said I always wanted to talk to someone from NASA, remember?
No.
Thanks.
New York City College of Technology.
Holy crap! Jeff, that's Greg Matloff, the leading expert in possibilities for interstellar propulsion and a tenured astronomy professor with the physics department of New York City College of Technology, who consults with NASA Marshall Space Flight Center, is a Hayden Associate of the American Museum of Natural History and a corresponding member of the International Academy of Astronautics, as well as the author of Living Off the Land in Space with Les Johnson of NASA and C. Bangs, and also the author of Deep Space Probes, as well as Telescope Power, More Telescope Power, The Urban Astronomer, The Starflight Handbook, which he co-authored with Eugene Malov, Matloff?
And I've specialized
I don't know what you just said.
The physics
Just
of
put your
the
headphones
solar
on, dude.
sail.
You know, this feels suspiciously like we're doing a freaking podcast.
Just wait till I dominate the conversation. Then it'll really feel like old times back home.
Are you kidding? It feels like that now.
Don't be assy. Dr. Matloff, hey! How goes the, space sail, or whatever?
The solar sail is essentially, okay, work it like this. The solar sail works by radiation pressure. What this means is sunlight and all other types of light, although it doesn't have a mass, can push you. So if you're exposed to a lot of light, to an intense enough light source, and if you have a large enough area, a high enough reflectivity, a low enough mass, you can get pushed to a fairly high speed. And the trick with solar sailing is to do all of this, to put all of these different aspects together. The experimental solar sails today are a couple of microns thick, and a micron is a millionth of a meter. And typically, what they have is 3 layers. The front layer, an aluminum layer, faces the sun. This is the reflective layer. This is on a plastic substrate, sometimes Kapton, sometimes other types of plastic. In back of this is a chromium layer, and with the chromium, it's usually chromium, not always. The purpose of this is to emit the small fraction of light which is absorbed by the aluminum. And that today is what we're doing, what people are experimenting with. There have been a couple of solar sail tests in space. One of these was the unfurlment of Znamya by the Russians from Mir space station in 1993. This was a test sail. And the Japanese have successfully tested more advanced sails more recently from a sounding rocket. There have been 2 failures, but these are not due to the problems of the solar sail. It's due to problems of the launch vehicle. One of these was by the Planetary Society, which is a private group. The other was by NASA. And these were both test sails which failed to reach orbit due to launch rocket problems. Now, if we're going to go to a star today with a current technology sail, it's going to take a long time. Why? Because something a couple of microns thick is still fairly thick from the point of view of what we could ultimately do. Also, we're limited in terms of the materials we have today. We can get maybe somewhat closer to the sun than Mercury is, safely. And the trick is you want to get as closely as you can. So if you get as close as you can, which is maybe a third again closer to the sun from Mercury, and then you open your sail, it can blow your probe out of the solar system at something like 50 to 100 kilometers per second, which sounds like a very large velocity, but it will take you something like 7,000 years to get to the nearest star. We would like to cut that down by a factor of 5 to 10 at least. And in order to do that, what we have to do is learn how to manufacture much thinner sails measured in tens of nanometers. A nanometer is 1 billionth of a meter, made of monolayer metallic substances. Right now, beryllium seems to be the best. Aluminum is pretty good also. And we would have to do this in space. We need a space-based infrastructure. And also, something like this could probably get somewhat closer to the sun by a factor of 3 or 4. Figure about 1/16th the distance of the Earth to the sun is probably pretty safe. In a case like this, it'll take you something between 1,000 and 2,000 years to get to the nearest star. The solar sail could be used, you could furl it, you could sort of tie it with its cables, which would be probably super strong, diamond strength, silicon carbide strength, something like that, and the cable itself around the payload to give you cosmic ray shielding in deep space. And when you get to the nearest star, which is actually 2 sun-like stars, you could unfurl the sail again and decelerate. You could use it in reverse. And it's the only interstellar propulsion system which serves all three functions. That's one of its great advantages. Okay,
is this something that you invented, or you and
no. I did not invent this. The solar sail is a very old concept. Solar radiation pressure goes back to Johannes Kepler in about the year 1600. He's a German astronomer, actually one of the people who leads directly into Newton's laws. Kepler noticed that the tails of comets always point away from the sun. So he knew that something was pushing it, he didn't know what. In the 19th century, the early theoretical work on electromagnetic waves by James Clerk Maxwell led very much to the theoretical basis for this. It was finally quantified by Einstein in 1905, measured actually, although it had been measured by Lebedev, I believe Lebedev in Russia a few years before that. The early theories of applying it in space travel were by Tsiolkovsky in Russia and in the Soviet Union, and F.H. Sandler also in Russia in the 1930s. I got involved in this in the 1970s, basically looking at different modes of interstellar transportation. And I decided to try something a little bit different. Everybody else was looking at various nuclear approaches, and it was suggested to me that I should investigate the sail, and I did that. And I was really surprised with what I found. So basically, my contribution is working out the formalism for the near-sun trajectories, I'm working a bit on the material science, working on the interaction between the sail and the interplanetary medium. I do have a recent book out on solar sails. The authors are Giovanni Volpetti in Italy, Les Johnson, who's a NASA manager who's worked with the NASA sail projects, and myself. It is called Solar Sails, a novel approach to interplanetary travel. It was published last year by Springer.
Is this something that NASA is going to put into effect?
Well, okay, we can't really predict what NASA is going to do or when they're going to do it. NASA has studied this for some time. NASA has study programs. They have worked on unfurling sails up to 20 meters across in test chambers on the ground. They did launch a test sail, which was maybe 10 feet across, something called Nano Sail D, on the third launch of the Falcon 1 rocket, which unfortunately failed because of the rocket, not because of the sail. NASA does have a backup to this one, and I presume at some point they will do this test sail again. The Planetary Society hopes to repeat the Cosmos 1 experiment. They'd call this Cosmos 2. And they might actually try to get beyond Earth orbit, maybe to one of the Earth-Moon Lagrange points, which would be very nice because they would demonstrate that they could steer with radiation pressure in space, as well as getting propulsion.
So what do you ultimately want to see this do? If you had your wish come true, what would it be?
Okay, I can see many applications to it. What I would like to see in my lifetime, in terms of interstellar travel, is a probe out to a few hundred astronomical units. The one astronomical unit is the distance between the Earth and the Sun. Ultimately, it would be nice with space-developed solar sails, maybe even laser-pushed sails, to propel a small payload out to the nearest star. Maybe if it's small enough and we have a laser to push it as well as the sun, we could do it in a couple of centuries, maybe even less. That would be a good possibility. I don't know if we're going to see starships with people in the near future. If you ask me about, we can talk about that a little bit later. Now, in terms of near-term applications, I think one of the most exciting applications of the solar sail is we could use it in a number of modes to divert Earth-threatening asteroids. If there's a near-Earth asteroid, an object which maybe can usually approach the Earth within a few million miles, and it happens to be moving directly towards us, if we have enough warning time, there are a couple of solar sail approaches to moving it.
Now, this is interesting to me because you also spoke at the conference about some of your own, I don't even know what to call them, contact experiences?
Okay, my own contact experience, personal one, I don't know if it's a contact experience. I would, but it might be in the same category of contact experiences. I know people, including respected scientists, who've had contact experiences. They don't like to talk about them because they're afraid of ridicule, because it is very easy for somebody to say, well, you were deluded, and just walk away. When I was 14 years old, riding on a bicycle in Queens, New York, I heard a voice, a woman's voice, yelling my name, Greg, and I later assumed it was my mother, but I have no proof of that, because she was a good distance away. I fell off the bike, looked around, there was nobody near me, and I got up, and this affected me, and to a certain extent, I think it made me a little more introverted, a little shyer, a little more bookish, and because of that, perhaps I studied harder and was sort of marked to do different things than many of my peers. When I listen to some of the contact stories, they really affect people in a big way. The problem is you can't prove what they are. And one of the possibilities, of course, is that, yeah, there are space aliens around. Another possibility is that everybody, including myself, is simply deluded. So from a scientific point of view, it's a frustrating field to study, but also it's very fascinating because it points to something we really don't understand.
Well, what does it do for you as a scientist, believing that? If you believe that was a contact experience, then anything that you're working on in terms of space, does it feel like do you constantly feel like just an ape with fire, or do you feel like you're getting somewhere, or how does that aspect work?
Well, I feel that very definitely I am getting somewhere with space. But how the research I do, and now people in my Department of Physics at New York City College of Technology are getting involved in it too, you're doing how the physics of the solar sail relates to contact experiences, I don't know. All I can say in my particular case, this was a very significant event, and it directed me. But I can't say what it was. I can list lots of possibilities. One of them, as I listed at the Culture of Contact talk, one of them, of course, is I was being programmed by space aliens. I could also say that it was deity. It was God or goddess talking to me. That makes, both of these are equally possible. Then perhaps there was somebody in a time machine coming back from the distant future and doing an experiment to see what I would do. Then maybe my mother had become telepathic. Maybe I was receiving communication from the dead. We could keep on listing these things. Each of them is a hypothesis. And we could also say that at the age of 14, my hormones were starting to kick in, so maybe I was deluded. Any one of these is equally possible, and nobody can come out and prove them. All you can do with these things is say that whoever is having a contact experience, it is a real experience for that person.
And all it was just saying your name? It was
my name.
Huh.
Greg.
Okay, so...
later on I said, Greg, you will do exactly what I say, but I may have added that later on. It was my name, Greg. That was the important thing.
Now, you mentioned other scientists, and of course you won't name names.
Okay,
so...
I won't name names. I know two people involved in space.
Michio Kaku, say it. Michio Kaku, say it.
Right, I will say what their experiences were. Because if I told you their names, they would probably kill me.
Right.
This was told. Their names were in confidence, but I can tell you what they did. One of these people is driving out west in the western part of the United States, and he is with a lady friend, and they experience basically a strange lighting effect. And what he told me is he was quite sure something that was not of military origin, nothing that he could explain had landed there, and he got away as quickly as he could. The other person, and I believe this, I forget if it was California or South America where he experienced this, was basically strange lights in, I believe, a forest. And, these are sincere people, hardworking people. They're people who've contributed to the field, their fields of research, and they're respected people, and yet they had experiences that they cannot explain.
So how do you guys go on doing, or at least you, I don't know what them, but, working at NASA as if everything is okay and we're on this upward trajectory when, towards some sort of contact with perhaps microbes on Mars or something when you're being contacted by something right now?
Well, okay, first of all, we don't know what the contact is. We don't know. It's certainly not it's not a continuous type thing. We can't, whatever is happening, we can't study it at this time. What people do is they do their research, they're making progress. Everybody has their own personal idea about this. And you probably are not going to find, you're not going to find two scientists who've had exactly the same experience and have exactly the same opinion. But certainly you have to be open-minded. You have to say, maybe there are aliens, maybe they're in the solar system. You cannot rule out aliens in the solar system, for instance. We know, and I'll explain to you exactly why. I participated in an essay contest on the web in 1998, which was put out by Robert Bigelow's organization, which was called National Institute of Discovery Science. And he was looking into new approaches to SETI, to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And what I did is I put together a scenario that could have many, many aliens living in the solar system. And it works like this. We don't have to have any technology more advanced than the best solar sails we could think of today. That would take a few thousand years to get to the nearest star. But there's two things to remember. Stars move around. At intervals of 100,000 years or so, a star more or less like the Sun will be at something like 1/3 to 1/4 the distance of Alpha Centauri today. So a 1,000-year trip to that star would take 300 years. And then when a star leaves the main sequence, as our Sun ages, and any star ages, it becomes more luminous. So what you do is you run through this possibility, and you see that over the last 4 billion years since the solar system started, there have been tens of thousands of near encounters with solar-type stars. And if some of those were stars that were leaving the main sequence, meaning they were even more luminous, a trip between that star and the Sun would be a lot faster. They would have to use other ways to slow down, of course, like magnetic braking, meaning at the stellar medium, something like that. Because the solar sail probably wouldn't be enough, because once again, although their star is that very luminous, the Sun would not be. So that is certainly, so the trick is you then have to say, if somebody came to the solar system, where are they? Everybody thinks, and in a million science fiction movies, they would naturally come to the Earth and enslave us and do stuff like that. But many scientists will disagree on this. They might study the Earth remotely. The Earth would probably not be hospitable for them. There'd be many types of life forms, including microbes, that are quite dangerous. And if they come and there's a technological society, we would learn pretty quickly and be able to fight back. So instead of colonizing the Earth or Mars or something like that, it might make a lot more sense for them to go into the Kuiper Belt. The Kuiper Belt is Pluto is the largest Kuiper Belt member. And these are comet-like objects up to maybe a lot smaller than the Moon, bigger than most comets. And they orbit between the orbit of Neptune and maybe about twice as far out from the Sun. So what I did, and I published this in the Journal of the British Interplanetary Society, is I basically was able to predict, to say, let us say that there are small Kuiper Belt objects, 10 or 20 kilometers across, that are inhabited. If they're inhabited, they would get their energy from sunlight, basically, because even though it's far from the sun, it's not so far away that they couldn't get their energy from sunlight, sufficient energy from sunlight. And what I had to do with this was figure out what the infrared signature of this thing would be. Because if they're organic creatures, as we are, that basically would imply is that they would need a lot more heat than you would naturally find in the Kuiper Belt. If there's more heat, there's more infrared radiation. So this object would look brighter in the infrared than most similar-sized objects in the Kuiper Belt. So what I did with these papers a couple of years ago is basically predict what the signature would be. Now, I co-authored the second paper with Dr. Tony Martin, who's a British plasma physicist, and he's a former editor of the Journal of the British Interplanetary Society. What Tony did is he looked at the infrared signatures of the largest Kuiper Belt objects. We have these, and of course, there was no demonstration there of anything artificial. You see, what you do, the whole trick is you come up with scenarios. And it's like the whole trip. This is what everybody who searches for life or extraterrestrial life, intelligent or otherwise, is doing. You set up scenarios, you try different things, and sooner or later we're going to hit the right scenario and find something. I'm very convinced that there's life all over the place because we're finding planets all over the place. We've now found a number of planets within the habitable zones of their stars, not Earth-like planets, like I think they're called super-Earths. And people are starting to do searches for Earth-like planets around nearby stars. Within a few years, I'm sure we'll have found those also. Mm-hmm. Now, within our own solar system, people used to think, the Earth was almost certainly the only place with life. But Mars is looking better and better for primitive life, at least in the distant past. Europa is an excellent possibility for life. And there's a moon of Saturn, Enceladus, which very possibly, it puts out it has liquid water geysers. Liquid water probably would also be a good sign of life. Titan, even though it certainly wouldn't be good for our type of life, might well have something. And the list gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It doesn't get smaller. Mm-hmm. So when you look at all this, and you have to say, okay, if there's so many planets, if there are Earth-like planets, and if there's life, we would have to explain why that life doesn't reach intelligence. We would also have to explain why intelligence doesn't develop technology. And if it develops technology, would it come and visit us? And this is what the big trick, what the big paradox is. This is called the Fermi paradox. And basically, the thing is, where is everybody? And it is a paradox. It is unknown. And people are saying, okay, we're at the point very soon where we could conduct extrasolar exploration. And we're very new to this game. There are many, many sun-like stars around, billions of years older than ours. When I say very, very many, I mean something probably in the tens of billions in our galaxy alone. So you basically have to say, why aren't they here? Why aren't we, or if they are here, how can we detect them? So what I've done is come up with a scenario that they could be here, and we just haven't gotten to the stage yet where we're capable of detecting them. Now, this basically is what science is about. It's coming up with something that's falsifiable. As time goes on, we're going to increase our sensitivity for infrared detectors on large telescopes. We're going to probe further into the Kuiper Belt, and we will see if there is anything artificial there. By the way, I should give credit to the guy who first suggested this. I just took it up from where he left it off. He was Mike Papagiannis, a radio astronomer at Boston University, And in 1985, he was the person who suggested we look in the Kuiper Belt, that that's a very good place to look for aliens.
Is SETI going to aim their telescopes there?
Well, what they do in finding Kuiper Belt objects, they don't really look for them. They're looking at something else, and they see a streak on the plate. Well, it's not a plate anymore; it's on the detector screen. And they look then at that streak. They try to see if there's something known in that vicinity. If there's nothing known, they have a new Kuiper Belt object, and they will study it. And then they will go and point their equipment at it and get more information. So as of this particular point, the discoveries have been accidental, largely. With the exception, even Pluto, you might say, is accidental, because Pluto was discovered, and it was misinterpreted. Largely, it was a matter of luck. Clyde Tombaugh happened to be looking at the right place at the right time, and he saw the second largest of the Kuiper Belt objects. But he was not. But the reason that he was looking, the perturbation of Neptune's orbit, is most likely due just not to a planet beyond Neptune, a big planet, but the whole cloud of maybe 1 trillion comets that moves out a third of the distance to the nearest star.
So if there is something here now, some other intelligence, would it make more sense to you that it would be interdimensional than interplanetary?
I would say that's another possibility too. If you look at the record of folklore, there was a guy a number of years ago, decades ago, named Charles Fort, who collected strange stories from centuries past. I believe he called his book Lo, L-O, with a exclamation point. And when you look back, 3,000 years ago, people were talking to gods, goddesses, semi-deities. It was direct communication. And then we go into a period of time in parts of the world where people are meeting fairies or leprechauns or elves. In the Middle Ages, in late Middle Ages in Europe, there was an experience that people have of the devil's footprints in the snow. And they're actually seeing the footprints left by the devil. And in around 1900, people are experiencing airships, mysterious airships which are landing, not spaceships, but airships. So, you certainly have to say that this is that interdimensional type contact is one possibility, and probably a very good possibility. I certainly wouldn't rule that out. There's a French researcher, Jacques Vallée, an astrophysicist, who has done a lot of work on the UFO phenomenon, highly respected work. Actually, he was in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He was the model for the French-speaking astronomer who basically gets the music going.
Right.
But Jacques Vallée believes, was pretty much his opinion, that it wasn't interdimensional, that these things that the UFO reports do not seem to be physical objects. In other words, they split, they join, they do strange maneuvers, almost like it's a projection of some type. Or maybe some type of hologram. That's another possibility.
Jeff, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Would the aspect that Jacques talks about, would that, my biggest problem with the whole UFO thing is that I don't really see the extraterrestrial hypothesis that's been floated out there for so long as really being very viable anymore. Just for the simple sake that we don't seem to have the amount of physical evidence that we should have if another physical culture is coming here and dealing with us in one way or another. Mm-hmm. That would be one part of the question to you, is how would we look at an extraterrestrial culture visiting us and not leaving behind anything whatsoever that we can detect in any meaningful way? And then the other half would be, if it is a extra dimensional or I don't know how else to put it other than some sort of bizarre quantum aspect of this whole thing, which I've kind of noticed in and out through the years of my own experiences. how would something like that be detected at all besides our ultimately fallible perceptions of it?
Okay, I would basically agree with you about the UFO thing. Just looking at our own experience with space travel, when you look at what humans do, we've gone to the moon and basically left garbage dumps.
Right.
I mean, every landing site, and this will be validated when people from America, Europe, Russia, China, India, and Japan, and who knows where else, go back there within another decade or so, they're going to see just a lot of crap. And even the experience of the astronaut a couple of weeks ago who lost that little toolkit at the International Space Station, a $100,000 toolkit escaped from her. We seem to be klutzy. And this is built into the human, basically the human equation. So you have to explain how are they all visiting us, and we don't even find a screw of extraterrestrial origin.
Right.
I certainly can't. I can't buy the thing about Area 51 because whenever no matter how high up I've gone in the NASA hierarchy, nobody knows anything about it. It's always maybe one step above them or one step above that.
Right.
If it's a conspiracy, why is that the only conspiracy that this country can keep secret? After all, the development of the nuclear bomb, which should have been a monopoly for the U.S., leaked. And it leaked like a sieve all over the place.
Right.
And then, of course, a former president's sex life, which should have been his own private life. That leaked also. We as a society, we're incapable of keeping secrets, except maybe for this one. So I simply don't believe it. I believe that I basically believe what finally came out of the analysis after the Freedom of Information Act, that the UFO hypothesis was used by the Department of Defense and the CIA to cover up their illegal spying on the Soviet Union in 1947. Right. And so, rather than it being a spy balloon or something like that crashed with nuclear detection devices, have them believe it's a UFO. Fine.
Sure.
So that's what I would say about that. Now, in terms of it being some type of quantum event or interdimensional event, maybe. I mean, all we can say about quantum mechanics in the brain is that the spacing between neurons is suitable for quantum events to occur. And then you can list the quantum events. You can say quantum tunneling. You can say, which means that your thoughts could go elsewhere in your own brain or to someone else's. You can talk about quantum correlation, which might mean you can see the future or see the past, or, of course, read someone else's mind. The Casimir effect, which means you can talk to the divine. But, people now are writing books about all this stuff. I think if you go to the New Age section of any bookstore, you'll see a lot more on that than serious quantum mechanics. There's no way that we could determine exactly what quantum effects are operating within the brain at any one time, probably without killing the organism. And we don't want to do that. It's hard to tell, maybe impossible to tell, which of these effects or other effects are more significant. Now, to say that is there somebody out there who understands this better than we do, who's mastered it, or maybe somebody from another dimension, or a deity, let's say, that can operate through our own brains, maybe what used to be called a mass hallucination that they would produce. You can't rule that out. But it's so frustrating because you can't prove it.
Right.
And that's, that is the frustration of the whole field, why so many people won't touch it.
Do you ever get frustrated that New Age authors and Buddhists and the Dalai Lama all try to use physics to prove out their belief systems?
Not really, because from my point of view, the only one of the major religions which comes moderately close to being validatable in terms of science is Buddhism, or some form of Buddhism, because the void is everything, and we know now that the creative void is what the universe came from. Mm-hmm. But of course, one could always argue that there might be somebody directing it through the void.
Wait a minute, did you say we now know that everything came from the creator void?
No, the creative void.
Oh, the creative void.
In other words, the dynamic vacuum.
Huh. Well, I actually had that experience, so yeah, you're right. But how do we know that through science?
Okay. What happened was this. In the 1930s, Paul Dirac, basically came up with a theory, and he basically called this I believe the quantum sea, SEA. And he figured that there would be underlying the vacuum was not completely empty, this extremely dynamic series of processes, large amounts of energy, large amounts of mass, coming into and out of existence in the twinkling of an eye, and positive mass, negative mass, positive energy, negative energy, everything balancing itself out. So on the average, there'd be zero. And he was actually able to come up with a prediction. His prediction was that an antiparticle to the electron would be discovered, and this was the positron. And for this, people got the Nobel Prize. I don't recall if he did, but the discoverer of the positron certainly did. Now, what happened next is to maybe relate it a bit more to us. In the 1940s, a Dutch guy named Casimir was investigating the bonds which hold molecules together, the water molecule. And he figured initially that this would all be electrodynamic, electricity, magnetism. But he noted that as the distance changed between molecules, the forces changed in something that was 20 or 30% off from what electromagnetic theory predicted. And he said, okay, you have these electromagnetic fluctuations, and not all of them can fit in between the molecules. They're too close together. So you have a vacuum pressure pressing the molecules together. And this, of course, had become known as the Casimir effect, zero-point energy, stuff like that. He was able to do a couple of early experiments, but they really couldn't be replicated at that time. That was the 1940s, late 40s, early 50s. It was not until the 90s, I believe, that nanotechnology had evolved to the point where people were able to do something with charged conductive plates with separations much less than a micron to demonstrate that the Casimir effect was for real. And now it's been validated. It is an accepted part of science. And some of the quantum physicists who studied it have also noted the fact that in fact, I would like to think I was the first one to notice that the separation between neurons in the brain was almost perfect for the quantum effect. And I'll tell you the story. It was maybe who knows? Maybe this would be a contact story. I had two friends, and unfortunately they were both older than me, and they were both mentors. They're no longer with us, at least in corporeal form. One was Bob Forward, who was an expert on basically various types of space drives, including the solar sail. And the other fellow is Evan Harris Walker, who was a pioneer on the physics of consciousness, the quantum physics of consciousness. And I think it was 1990 or 1991, I was teaching a couple of courses at Long Island University, their Brooklyn campus. They have a good nursing department and a physical therapy department, so they also have a nice library. And I had time between classes. I had just read something of Bob Forward's, which said that the idea, if you're going to build something to try to tap zero-point energy in a space drive, and this may or may not ever be possible, the ideal separation of the charged conducting plates is 20 nanometers, 20 billionths of a meter. I looked through Harris's paper, and he talks about the separation between synapses in the brain, the intersynaptic spacing, but he doesn't mention a number. So I said, I got to find out what this number is. So I was at the college, and I picked up a dictionary of anatomy, and I basically fell on the floor because the ideal spacing is 20 nanometers. And I didn't believe it, so I went to another dictionary, or encyclopedia, I forget which, and that confirmed it. So what I did next is I forget if we had email at the time, or if I wrote. Anyway, I communicated with both Bob Forward and Harris Walker about this. I said, this is pretty amazing. And within a few months, Roger Penrose in the United Kingdom began publishing his work, which basically is sort of similar to this. So, and other people have caught up in it also. I never published it, but I would like to think that I was the first, and then other people heard from me. But of course, via the grapevine, of course, in as many as people have observed, ideas propagate when they're ready in many minds at the same time. And I wasn't going to publish this idea because it's not my field, although I certainly found it fascinating. Other people were going to jump on it.
Yeah, Jeff and I were just talking about that yesterday, about, hey, have you ever just said something online and then suddenly you see it everywhere and you wonder if people are stealing from you? Maybe that's just it. It's just an idea whose time has come.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, I have sort of my own little personal physics question. Is it possible that the more we break down quanta, eventually, because you're going to get to nothing, what you're going to hit is your own projection?
Well, I don't know. This is because of the observer effect, once again, as you break down more and more, the interaction between the observer and the observed becomes more and more significant. You're dealing more and more with probabilities. And there are some people who say, this is an extreme case, that the universe only exists because it's observed. So if that's true, everything is a projection. And there are people who've come up with theories that the universe is basically a hologram. So I'm not saying anything unique over here.
Mm-hmm. Huh. And Jeff, why don't you ask him your $1 million question?
Yeah, mine's a little bit convoluted, but I just want to give you like a little bit of backstory as to how this fits into the question. Throughout my life, with these bizarre experiences, I'm one of those guys who's basically seen a little bit of everything. I mean, I've had the majority of stuff has been the UFO/alien, whatever that may mean, interaction events, which are always for me extraordinarily terrifying. But my wife and I and some other members of my family have also experienced the ghost phenomena, that kind of thing. I'm seeing, as time goes on and I get older, that there are a lot of connective tissues between these type of events. And one of them being is I seem to find an effect that is the more attention or the more focus that is placed upon a subject like this, the more the enigma itself or the anomaly itself seems to manifest itself. And I'm not talking about laying there listening for that bump in the night. It's essentially deep thought or deep questions, deep personal questions about, in particular, the UFO alien phenomena. Really kind of focusing on that for long periods of time and then forgetting about it, not really expecting anything to happen or looking for anything to happen. And all of a sudden, that's when you'll get your most undeniable experience. And I've had those experiences both alone and with other people. Mm-hmm. So how does all of that kind of figure in? I mean, I've come across some things in quantum physics based on the observer and the focus of intent that seem to make, or so it's said, that these things can manifest changes in your life, changes in your work, your money, your relationships, whatever. I ignore all that for the most part, and I look at how I've been with these different phenomena. It's been based on the amount of attention that I seem to devote to it. And at one point, my home life, my wife can attest to this, was pretty much a three-ring circus. We had things going on almost on a weekly basis. There would be some type of really undeniable event, a sighting, these beings which were at times very solid and very real, tangibly real to me, but at other times were nothing more than perceived distortions in the air, humps in the air, if you want to call them that, almost akin to a ghost phenomena. So these things were all perceived by myself, other people around me at different times, but always in line with how much attention or focus had been placed upon it at any given moment. Okay. So I'm curious how that kind of works into the physical aspects of the quantum effect.
Okay, I think it would seem to me from what you're saying, and I would probably agree that if UFO phenomenon of this nature, they are not a physical phenomenon. In other words, these aren't space aliens. This is something else.
Right.
In fact, what you're saying may be the answer to the Fermi paradox, because as a civilization advances, it may get to the point where it looks inward instead of outward. And it starts, I could imagine, what if the concept, for instance, of ghosts are real? You've experienced ghosts. Is that correct? And I know other people who have also. I've never really seen a ghost, but what if it is possible to communicate with the dead? What if there is a cycle of life and death? What if they're with us? What if they're reincarnated? Whatever. In a situation like that, if we develop a technology that can do this, that would become, to me, probably a lot more fascinating than flying, a couple of light years to explore another planet or to colonize another planet. And a society might choose not to do something like that until its star died, because the inward exploration would become much more important. Mm. And, we certainly are advancing at a very, very rapid rate in quantum mechanics and in computing. Ultimately, at some particular point, somebody will manage to have a quantum computer. And what this will tell us about these events, I just don't know. It's a time of great mystery, to me at least, and great possibilities, and it's almost like there is something shimmering at the very edge of reality. It's almost like saying, hey guys, this is the answer. You don't understand it yet. The answer is right here.
Right.
And it's, it almost looks sometimes like we're being programmed to move in a certain direction.
Right. That sounds ultimately familiar to me. I'm not entirely sure how familiar you are with the DMT research that's been going on. DMT, it's DMT research. It's basically it's a compound that's all over the place. It's in all forms of life in one form or another. I think for us, Jeremy, it's the pineal gland is where DMT is produced. And a guy named Terence McKenna did quite a lot of work and research into the shamanic practices of certain peoples down in the Amazon, South America, and elsewhere. And what they have found with DMT research is that when enough DMT is ingested by a person, that anyone who takes it at a sufficient prepared dosage is experiencing the same experience, which is being in a round, white, soffitted light room, and there are beings there. And McKenna referred to it as elf. You're plunged into like an elf mentality of or different reality. He said this was not a state of mind. This was a place. Mm-hmm. And I find that to be truly fascinating stuff, because most of what is in my own experiences has been this very bizarre, surrealistic error to this whole UFO thing that has thrown me for a loop several times. But I'm always torn between the dimensional, or possibly, well, I guess dimensional is the best way to put it, that they exist all around us at any given time. We just cannot perceive them without being in an altered state of consciousness. Right. And that part has always been the toss-up for me, because I think, like I said on a previous show, is that Carl Sagan actually said that if we ever met a culture that had evolved completely independent of Earth and all of her influences, that the experience would be inexplicably weird. Yeah. So I'm always kind of torn between the two, but these days I lean more towards that reality is far more than we've come to know it as, and that there's far more to life and existence than we've ever been dared to believe. I think the only thing that a rational and sane and sensitive person can do is to keep an open mind, is to sort of look around and say, I live in a wonderful place. This is a marvelous universe. I don't understand it completely. I mean, the astronomers have to admit that they can measure and observe maybe 5% of what's out there, which is very shocking to them. Even things like negative energy, whatever that is. Right. And dark matter, dark energy, dark matter. I mean, this all ties in, and it's all part, I think, of the same mosaic. And I just, would like to hope that, okay, I'm not just say hello. I just hope that in our lifetimes we get to understand it a little bit better.
So why do you think it is that scientists and NASA in particular have a rap as thinking that they've got everything down, and that it's all going to boil down to some sort of materialism?
Okay, well, basically you have to remember that what NASA has is, it's an organization which is funded by government agencies. And the politicians who fund NASA have to be very careful about their own constituents. The people at NASA have been burned. The people in SETI have been burned. And what happened, the burning occurred in, I think, the mid-1990s, when NASA had revived its SETI project called Project Phoenix, Come Back from the Dead, and the firebird that rises from its own ashes. And basically, they were going for funding for the second year, and there was a congressman who stood up with the National Enquirer and said, gee, they want $2 million to listen for little green fellows, and they haven't netted one yet. And yet right here in this here newspaper, they're here all the time. And apparently the entire House of Representatives broke out in hysterics, and the funding never happened. So NASA is extremely careful. Another thing, basically, is that what Carl Sagan said, and I believe he was right in something like this, extraordinary theories require extraordinary evidence to prove them. If this is proven, if something like this exists, if there are aliens or if there are interdimensional beings, aliens nearby who we can have contact with, or interdimensional beings who influence our own lives, this will change everything. And therefore, we have to be very careful. Another reason is that there've been too many frauds. You know, the human culpability works so beautifully. Look what happened in the 1960s with the Stanford Research Institute and a certain very famous psychic who turned out to be a magician. I won't mention the person's name. Many quantum physicists were taken in by this. A lot of forks got bent, which turned out to be a very nice little trick. But the person who did this, although he, no matter what type of psychic ability he manifested, he certainly was a magician. He did extremely well financially, simply from the celebrity factor. And this goes on totally. Like another example with NASA, they're looking very carefully for life on Mars. And somebody who had been a NASA contractor starts writing books about the great face of Cydonia. Which turns out to be a sand dune. But by the time the later probes demonstrated it's a sand dune, there's been a lot of water under the bridge, a lot of sand under the bridge, a lot of books have been sold, a lot of lecture tour money's been spent. Some people have gotten very rich off this. So NASA has to be exceedingly careful. And, I'll give you an example of how careful they are about it. There was a conference at Princeton University a couple of years ago, and I was there, as was a NASA colleague. People decided to visit what's called the PAIR Society, which is the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab. And this was funded by initially by one of the aerospace companies, was basically saying, look, we're getting this quantum level equipment in these fighter planes. And the quantum level equipment is being operated by young men and young women the young men at least on testosterone, the young women probably on a lot of estrogen, very excited, very energetic, and very scared probably. Who knows what effects are going to go on? So let's investigate these things. And they basically have, under the direction of a guy named Robert Yan, I believe an electrical engineer, gotten some provocative results. But the NASA manager who was with us could not go into the facility. He waited outside because he was very, very afraid of what would happen if his name were associated with it. Simply because they've been burned before. And you get burned enough, you get very scared and very, very cautious.
So when you so would you say that, for instance, Seth Shostak, you're friends with him, right?
Yeah.
And he goes on Larry King and he laughs off all of these UFO cases on there and debunks. Do you think that he's being authentic, or do you think he's covering SETI's hide based on all of what you've just told us?
Well, I think that basically there's a point of view. And the point of view is that if you are funded by the SETI Institute, you have to dissociate yourself from these things which have gone on before. But, and also, you have to be a little open at the same time. Like, if you look at his books are open on interstellar travel. His books are open on the possibility of direct contact. But he's also saying, let's have proof. Yes. In other words, one of the main problems, and I'm sure you've seen it too, when you were with a real UFO enthusiast, somebody who is absolutely convinced that these are spaceships, they present a scenario, and you can go through hours and hours and hours, or weeks discussing it, coming up with a rational explanation, and then they look at you and say, well, what if this is the case? And it's very easy for them to change one or two things, but very, very, very difficult for you to look at all the permutations. And that's not the way science works. In science has to be falsifiable. In other words, you set up a hypothesis, and the hypothesis has to be such that it can be either proven or disproven at any point. And I would say, you can say about UFOs, you can say if there are UFOs in the number, and if the UFOs are flying saucers or alien spaceships in the number that people report, they have to live in the solar system. And if they live in the solar system, they have to live in the Kuiper belt. It's a logical place. So let's come up with a third strategy, which is falsifiable. And, it doesn't have to be the Kuiper belt. You could do the same thing about the near-Earth objects, the moons of Mars, what have you, as long as it's falsifiable, as long as you can answer it one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, do you have any further?
My head is smoking.
Jeff, wake up.
It's been a nice long interview, I know.
It's great, though. No, I think there was one question that's already been answered that I had, which was the proof thing. I mean, I think ultimately when you start talking about this subject, and I think the public generally has the idea that NASA, I mean, due to people like James Oberg and Shostak, they look at that and they say, well, then all these people, they, as a whole, they don't believe this. I mean, would you say it's kind of with who you've interacted with at NASA? And I realize you may not have been able to get into deep conversations about this subject with them, but do you find that more of them are more open to this subject than what the public may outwardly see all the time?
I would say that there's no such thing as a typical NASA person as a NASA point of view. I saw basically 3 or 4 different types of people there. And the type who I found most interesting to deal with were the visionaries, which are maybe 20 or 30% of NASA. And among these people, I would say they're open. They're saying we are exploring, we're doing something new, we're moving into totally new realms. We don't know what we're going to find. And, if we find intelligence or signs of intelligence, wonderful. Great. Let's keep open to that. But on the other hand, it will still require, because it's such an extraordinary event, and a world-changing event to find it, it will require extraordinary evidence.
Thank you very much for coming on and doing this with us.
You're welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Speaking to you. Welcome.
Bye-bye.
And good night. Bye-bye.
So, Jeff, what do you make of The Good Doctor? Did you get to ask all of your physics questions you've ever wanted to ask?
Well, no, not all of them. But I didn't want to keep him very long to explain all those questions. But yeah, I mean, I found the solar sail stuff pretty interesting. I don't know about you, but that was a pretty interesting little speech he gave there about that. I think though, he's great because, I mean, he's a freaking scientist, but at the same time, he keeps all these possibilities on the table. It doesn't seem to poo-poo anything away out of hand, which is, I hate to say it, but it's the way scientists are portrayed in the media, especially when it comes to this subject. They're always portrayed as the ones who just, that poo-poo this all away, and it's nothing, and this isn't what you saw, this is what you saw, and I think it was pretty refreshing to talk to a man like him who keeps these options on the table and doesn't just dismiss them. And I get a kick out of the fact that his big in contact experience was simply hearing a woman say his name loudly and there was nobody around. It's like, it's that simple little thing. That's all it takes.
That one little thing, it was like a butterfly flapped its wings and created a tsunami across the world. It changed the course of his life or, in some way altered it or helped form it. I find that fascinating. Yeah.
Well, I'm willing to bet that he's had more.
Well, yeah.
I'm willing to bet he's had some more.
I think there's more than wings on that butterfly.
Right, yeah. That butterfly has some almond-shaped eyes. But yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of refreshing to hear somebody talk about, folks at NASA like being, I don't know if he went as far as to say that they're ultimately interested in this subject, but I think that the fact that they keep that aspect open, that they're at least willing to entertain the idea of that. I mean, as far as the focus intention angle, I mean, where does anybody go with that? I don't know I don't know what kind of answer I expect out of that question, but it's like, in relation to the observer and the observed, and I thought the way he answered that was I think as good an answer as you're ever going to get from anyone about it, because frankly we just don't know enough.
Well, yeah, you can't know what's going on in the human brain that way, or at least not now.
No.
But there's enough room in there to hypothesize that it's possible, right, for us to basically leave our, think in someone else's brain, to project into someone else's brain.
Yeah.
Some sort of psychic thing. I mean, once you're ready to allow that, then it's not that much of a leap to allow that there might be a race of beings who need us to perceive them to pull them into this dimension.
Right. And the thing that I did want to mention in that whole scenario is there's your answer for why we don't have any real hard, tangible proof. Like he said, a nut off of one of the nuts and bolts off of something, or even biological material that doesn't match up to anything that is connected to, a contact event. I mean, we don't have that. We've never had that.
He did say you may have answered Fermi's paradox, so you might be a genius. Maybe you should get the Nobel.
Yeah, let's not go there. I mean, I think that answers the whole question of why we don't have anything. The one thing I would have liked to have asked, and maybe if we have him on again, I'll get to this, is that if another culture or beings are coming here from some parallel dimension of some sort, or whatever else place that there could be that we don't know about, that is in our midst all the time, if they came here, would something like that in some kind of parallel dimension be able to stay here for an extended period of time? Or would it be only in those short spurts? Would there be windows? I mean, I think Hynek mentioned that, I heard someone had mentioned that he regulated this whole thing to a certain point to doors and windows, opportunities for them to slip in, but that they could not stay. I guess, if you want to get into the whole dimensionality type of thing, that it can't exist here for very long. Whatever their technology is, that whatever they've developed is what may allow them to stay for as long as they're able. But at a certain point, they lose cohesion and cease to exist here. And maybe that's why no sighting really lasts all that long. And I'm talking about the ones that we can't really regulate or assign to a black project or a top secret craft of some sort. That's kind of the part where a lot of people have issue with that portion of my outlook on this stuff these days is, well, Jeff, what about landing trace cases? I'm not saying that things can't be physically real enough to interact with the environment, but we also don't know how many of these black projects that are out there that our lovely government military are developing that are landing in a farmer's field somewhere and doing crop damage or burning of the tops of trees and then getting out. There's no way to really differentiate that. Ted Phillips has said that he's done throngs of work on landing trace cases, but I don't remember anything ever coming out of it being, we've got extraterrestrial debris, or we've got debris here or effects here that could not possibly have been created by any other means that we have. I've not heard that. I mean, I think if we had by now, we'd know about it. So there's where's the line of demarcation in what is a black project's effects on our environment and what is this phenomenon's effects on our environment? I don't know that we'll be able to differentiate that, if there is any, from the phenomena at all.
The only thing I really wanted to ask him outside of all this was, he had basically, he didn't say Richard Hoagland, but that's what he was talking about,
sure,
with the Face on Mars stuff. But there was a woman, right, who came out and said that she worked at NASA and she was told to doctor photos that showed buildings or something, right, on the moon and on Mars or whatever. That,
yeah.
Something, I'm probably butchering the story, but it's, I wonder if he knows about that and what he thinks about her. I remember seeing the interview. Oddly enough, I remember her seeming pretty honest, but I don't remember the story.
Well, and you notice that kind of peaked up, and then you didn't really hear that much about it. There was never really any big hoopla over it other than the initial out interview that she did. I don't remember, I don't remember a big stir about it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, a skeptic would say, well, that's because it wasn't true. And a believer would say, well, then she was told to shut the hell up. So we never know what that, I mean, but I've seen a couple of NASA photographs that show pretty evident retouching. So the question is, what are they retouching?
Well, it's also interesting. He's obviously had these conversations with at least 2 top scientists who have revealed to him their contact experiences.
Yeah.
And he also said that he did go snooping around, right, to look into like Area 51. So he, some of this stuff must really pique his interest on more than just a theoretical level.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I don't know. We should have probably gotten into that more. In other words, he must have spoken to a good number of people about this topic. I wonder what specifically they had to say. Obviously, they didn't say, you better shut up and not ever talk about this.
Right.
Conspiracy stuff didn't happen. So, what did they say? Well, 2 people we know said, yeah, I had contact experiences too. Which I find fascinating.
Wouldn't it nice to be a fly on the wall for that,
Yeah, I would love to know who that is. Michio Kaku. We gotta have him on and just accuse him of being, just start talking about it yeah, Dr. Matloff mentioned that you saw a UFO, maybe in California, it might have been in South America.
Right, yeah.
And just to see if we can get him to out himself.
Oh, well, I don't know if that's going to happen, but, it's kind of like the WOW signal from SETI. They talk about how important that was, and the guy, wrote on the readout, wow, and it was a big deal, but they've never heard anything from that direction again. I think that I think when you stick with a project like SETI for long enough, you've got to hear some interesting things. And I don't think we hear about all of them. I really don't. My big question was going to be to him was, well, if NASA ever did come across anything, say on Mars, they came across something absolutely definitive that said there was not only microbial life on there, but that there was, life like us, completely intelligent and had technology. What if they found something really bizarre on Mars? Would we get to hear about it? Do you honestly believe we'd get to hear about it? I got real reservations about if the government would actually, or the whatever powers that be, would actually let NASA say that. I think people are ready to hear that. I think everybody's, right on the edge of saying, yeah, I would want to know that. But I question whether, I don't think something like that's going to change our lives. I think the only thing it might do is maybe set religion on its ear a little bit. But, I don't know. I always, and I know it's a movie, but I always think back to the movie Contact and how that, when they started getting the definitive signal, they were immediately clamped down. You've got to be quiet about this. This is now a top secret project. This is, this, that, and the other. So I got to wonder, would we be allowed to know? Would someone sneak it out? That's the big question, because NASA says, outwardly, well, this is what we're looking for. If there was evidence, we would be talking about it. But like he says, they have to be extraordinarily careful about what they say.
Yeah, I thought all of that was very interesting.
That was damn interesting, yeah.
Probably the most telling of anything.
Yeah.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking, geez, if these beings are here and they're having these covert conversations with you and I and others, and they don't want to be outed, then why do we want to out this? You know what I mean? Like, either if they have a nefarious purpose for hiding, then do we really want to screw with that and risk the ramification, risk the repercussions of that. And
dematerialization.
Yeah, and if they're doing it for our own health in some way that we can't recognize, then do we really want to screw with that? I mean, what are the options? Those are the two, right? Is there another option?
Well, this is the whole "why are they here" question. Is that what this is?
Well, no, this is a whole why do we want disclosure about, taking that all of this is a given, not. Well,
I don't know that. I don't know that. I mean, I've said for a long time I don't know that we do. I don't know that we do. Everybody crying for disclosure, and they don't even know what they're asking for. So, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I mean, the way I look at it, if this whole thing wanted to be known about tomorrow to everyone, it would be, and there wouldn't be anything anyone could do to stop it. But I tend to think that the large part of the cover-up, if there is such a thing as a cover-up with all this, is that the beings are the ones doing the covering up. And maybe it's because that they don't want to panic us. They don't want I think the idea of having beings around you, walking through you, and occupying the same general space would be pretty uncomfortable to most people. I don't know how people would actually handle that.
Well, yeah, you talk about this in terms of it being toxic, and I think just in thinking about the secrecy aspect, that has to be true, whether it's toxic because they're bad guys doing toxic things. Well, once again, if we find that out, then what are the ramifications? And if it's that they're toxic for reasons that they understand and we don't, and they're actually benefiting us by not coming out and being public with whatever they're doing, then we shouldn't know that.
I mean, if
it's just let nature take its course.
If it's toxic because of how we're perceiving it, maybe it's something, as I said before, maybe it's something that we have to do. And maybe part of what they're doing is trying to...
But it's obviously not something that can be remedied by them coming out and shaking our hands and saying, this is what we are, or whatever. You know what I mean? If there was some way to remedy it on that surface level, it would have been done by now. If that were on the cards.
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated than that, I'm sure. But... I think, and ask me in a year's time what I think, and it could be totally different, but I'm leaning towards the direction that it seems toxic because of us, and our perception of it. I think what they, if you want to get in, what are they doing? Why don't they just come out like that? I think that maybe they might know a little bit about how it's going to look to us, and maybe that they're trying in some way to, shove it out that they're not what we think they are. And we have to, I don't know what we have to do to get past the notion of perceiving these things the way we do. But I mean, clearly it's giving us signs that, it's not what it claims or seems to be. This is obviously must be on our part, or it wouldn't be showing up as a Hoover end cap. Floating over the Amazon. I keep going back to that because I think that's such an important point. And that, by the way, isn't the only case like that. I've talked before about the woman seeing the 18-wheeler tractor trailer over her barn. Same thing. It's appearing in that form. To me, that's a big clue. Is that we need to break the cultural contamination issue, and how do we do that? I don't have any idea.
And it's also funny listening to him talk about, as a kid he has a contact experience, or any of these people, who are major scientists that have these contact experiences. I would then think, if that were me, my life would feel masturbatory after that. All of this looking into outer space and all that, it would just, unless, as he said, he felt like it somehow put him on a path, right?
Uh-huh.
So that would be the only way it wouldn't feel masturbatory, is if we were on a path. So if you're put on a path to go through these rudimentary steps of science, that again means that there's something that these beings in this whole space travel thing will not or cannot give us, but want us to have. Because they're beeping into his life and putting him on a path toward it,
right.
But they're not giving it to him directly. So Something about that. I don't know. What do you think about that? Is there a clue in there to what's going on? I mean, that's very specifically space travel oriented stuff.
Maybe. I mean, what did Whitley say in the first show about that these beings have more to do with pulling the strings in our lives and in our reality, that far more than we think. And if that's true, then are they nudging in certain directions to make different discoveries? I mean,
well, Matloff said that too.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I disagree with that. I mean, I can only tell you that way back when I first started getting into this really, really heavily, which was, after I was married, I remember telling my wife that, I remember exactly where I was. I was standing out on my deck, and I was just looking around outside at dark, and she says, you know the stigma that's attached to this if you start talking about this stuff. And we were newly married and working professionals, which we still are, but she's like, the stigma attached to this stuff is that you're insane. And I told her, I said, I can't escape the overwhelming feeling that getting into this and digging around in it and talking about it openly and brutally honestly about everything is, I felt literally pushed to do it. Like, I don't think I've ever, when you make a choice in your life and you go, this is the right choice, there's always that little bit of doubt that, could I screw this up? I never had that feeling at all when it came to becoming involved intimately in this subject. It was the most overwhelming feeling of, this is the way to go. This is what you have to do. So I did feel kind of, and there was not a hint of apprehension about it. There was not a hint of I could fail at this or whatever. I just had that overwhelming feeling of, this is what I have to do. This is very, very important, and I'm making the right choice in exposing myself to this and to the public in interacting in this community about this subject. So I didn't have any great experience that pinged that off and said, you must do this, or I don't necessarily feel like I was set on a path, but I certainly had that feeling of, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, which I guess is why I've never been able to get away from it.
Well, here's the other thing is, when I think about my experiences, I think about them in terms of them unfolding in a logical way. But but how does that fit in with your thinking that, and I've experienced it, so I know that it's true, of concentrating on it and then shutting up and then it comes to you. Do you think that both are true at the same time, or do you think one over the other? Do you think you're put on a path?
Or are you the co-creator of your path?
I think that aspect of it, when I first got into it, never occurred to me. And it took a long time for that to actually sink in. That this effect is there, and it's not just there for me, it's there for a whole lot of people. And not just in the UFO thing either, not just for that, but the ghost crowd and whoever else studies paranormal events in general. I've talked to people about that before, and they've oh my God, yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. So this is not like a new thing as far as the experience goes, but I think it's certainly one of the aspects that I think that I was meant to see from it, or else I don't think it would have manifested in the way that it did, to be so damned obvious about it. Mm-hmm. So I almost feel like that was one of the things that I was supposed to talk about, that and particularly when I saw people in the abduction thing. I mean, 10 or 12 years ago, when you talked about stopping abductions for people who really didn't want it to happen to them anymore, that not one person that I talked to ever said, "Well, you can't. There's no way that you can't stop it." That was the theory back then. That was the whole idea. It can't be stopped. You have to learn to integrate it into your life. And yeah, past experiences, you do. You have to learn how to integrate that into who you are and what your experience in life has been. And it will change the way you look at the world. There's no question of that. I know you've probably been asked half a dozen times, how do you live? How do you get up and go to work and have a job and a family and this is going on? You do because you have to. But most people back then, I saw real people really suffering with this whole issue. And I think that seeing that and then finding out later on that, wait a minute, the more you're upset by this and the more you focus on, I don't want this to happen, and you're just bringing more of it in. You're in this endless cycle of worry, fear, experience, worry, fear, experience, worry, fear, experience. And the constant is that you are focusing on what you don't want. And what you don't want or you do want is irrelevant. You're focusing on this subject, that experience, your fear, their fearsomeness, and you're just perpetuating it over and over and over. And again, I always have to say, this is not about, because I really want to drive this point home, because a lot of people hear what I'm saying and say, well, of course you're seeing aliens because you expect to see something weird, so therefore everything you see is going to be weird. And I'm not going to sit on this chair and lie and tell these people that I didn't wig myself out a couple of times. I absolutely did. And I was lucky enough to have a wife and a research partner at the time who would pull me back and go, now, Jeff, that was the cat, or that was, the refrigerator kicking on, or something like that, because it will make you a little bit paranoid.
Right.
But after a while, you get past that. You realize that the experience itself is undeniable. It is much more in your face, and you can very, very easily differentiate your own fear from the legitimate experience. So I think part of what I felt driven to do was to tell people, you don't have to live with this if you don't want to. And I think by and large, I mean, judging from my email box sometimes of certain times of the year and certain years past, I was apparently listening to a book somewhere with a phone number. and I didn't know anything about it. I'd get people calling me at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night saying, yeah, I got your name out of this thing. I'd talk about an experience I had, and I'd go on and tell them, do you want it to stop? And some of them didn't. Some of them said, well, if there's something to learn about all this, I'd certainly like to figure out what it is. I said, then okay, you can deal with it. But those who couldn't, and the vast majority didn't want it to happen again, I would just tell them, involve yourself in something else. Get a hobby, read a different book, not one on UFOs and aliens. Watch a movie, go outside and play with your kids, take a drive in the country, and don't look up. Because you look up, you're expecting something. That's proved to be, for several people, the way to make it stop. I got tons of letters. I can't thank you enough, blah, blah, blah.
There was also, there was for a while the notion of, and you experienced this too, but of this sort of Christian thing of, it's demons, and if you just pray to Jesus, they'll go away. Mm-hmm. So if what we have is these beings, they interact with us, they have their own little agenda that they unfold in our lives. That's on one level. On another level, maybe the fundies figured it out first, but they wrongly attributed it to Jesus. if you ignore it, it'll go away. If you will it away, it'll go away.
Mm-hmm.
Has nothing to do with whatever your particular God is. It's just the act of doing that.
Right.
So if they wanted you to know this, then what do you think comes next? I mean, essentially, you're outing their to and fro. You're outing their means to come and go in here. So if that's true, what's next for them? What do you think?
Well, walk. That was what was next. Was that little experiment that I think, if I had the balls to actually go through with it, probably would yield something. I think at that point is
meet them on your terms, you mean?
Yeah. That if you have a hand in manifesting them or opening the door, then you also have a hand in how close they get. And, it's a difficult thing to do, to have it so close up so many times and be so horribly, horribly afraid of it. And then to realize this and say, okay, I'm going to picture, I'm going to focus on having a sighting of something that is a distance enough away that I'm not afraid of it. Because there's always that little point in the back of your head. Am I opening the door again? Am I letting this, am I going to be able to control it that easily? Will it abide by what I want? I don't know. And that's the part that bothers me.
Well, should it abide by what you want is a question.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I would think that if it truly wants to interact with someone and that someone says, okay, I get it, or at least I get it for me in my life, in my perspective on it. If I get it for me, does that mean that that it's ready for the next step and I'm not? Or am I going to be able to hold it back? Because that always seemed to be the bad part about the whole thing is like I told you, my old research partners, shit doesn't stink till you stir it. The question is, can I be ready with the Glade can to keep it to a tolerable level? And that's what I don't know. That's what I worry about.
You're never going to have a family show with that kind of potty mouth.
I know. Well, kids hear worse than that at school. But that's kind of my hang up with it is I'm just, I think that I need to work on, again, being a less angry person, being a less, fearful person. Half of me sometimes thinks that all the fear that I experienced with those people was meant to desensitize me to a certain degree. Because as a kid, I was a fearful kid. I was afraid of other kids. I had a lot of friends and I did a lot of things and went a lot of places, but I always had this, I don't know, what I look at these days is kind of being an abnormal amount of fear of other people and certain places. And I don't have any of that anymore after those experiences. There's nothing I really fear besides death and aliens. Everything else is kind of like, whatever. So I think I need to work on me from the aspect of regaining the innocence of curiosity and not looking upon these things as bad or evil or terrifying, and perhaps that will turn the experience over and let me see another side of it that maybe I've never had before. But until such time as I can get it through my skull that what I've seen has been a product of me, has been a product of how I've wanted to perceive it, because that's been my mindset. They're terrifying. They're ugly. They're scary. They're dirty. They make me do things I don't want to do. They come into my home uninvited. I need to be able to let that go, and that's been really hard to do. So that's like the best answer I can give for that is I don't know what the next step is, but I know there has to be one. And I was driving to work today, and a couple of times, which I notice I never really do anymore, is that, again, back in the day, the first thing I do when I walk outside would be to look up. And I don't do that anymore. I don't look. And I noticed that when I was driving to work today, I was listening to Culture Contact on the pod and going
yes.
Yes. And I just started like looking around, and I don't know how else to explain it other than back when I had a lot of experiences going on and I was having a lot of sightings of very strange stuff, I had a certain connected feeling in thought with looking for them. And I noticed this morning that I don't have that anymore. And I think that is me shutting that out. Not being willing to open myself to it again in that way. So I think it's going to take a bold move, as in going out to a secluded area by myself, alone, middle of the night, and getting out of the car and standing in the middle of a field and looking. And I'd be reasonably sure if I did that for a certain amount of days that that I would have something occur. Whether or not it would be in that field or not, it's a whole different story. Mm-hmm. But I think going out and looking is the way to do it. My problem is that I just don't have the stones for that right now. I'm just not at that place.
How do we get you stones? It's for the betterment of all humanity that you get stones. Or maybe just stoned.
That's
like a Gene Steinberg joke.
There you go. I think that I really need to. I think I need to start out by just reacclimating myself to the phenomena again, which means cracking a book now and then and pondering the deeper questions that I have. And I've got some really deep ones that I don't talk about, but that's kind of how it came about before. So will it come about again? I don't know. But I think I like to think I have a better handle on myself interacting with these things than I did before. Before it was just, they're scary, I don't want them near me, I don't want to see things. So I've kind of got this back and forth where I think, you should just get into it one more time, and try to keep yourself a little bit more contained and open about stuff. Contained in the sense of not being a blithering idiot, and not being so horribly afraid, because nothing has happened to you. You're not dead. You're not injured. You're not dying. So you went through all that I can't say without a scrape, but you came through it okay. So really, what is there to fear, really? I mean, what am I afraid of when it comes to this? And it ultimately comes down to a lack of control. It always has been that. I think I've mentioned on other shows before that I've got, a head full of teeth that should be pulled, and I'd probably be a lot better off to do that. But the fact of the matter is they want to put me to sleep to do that, and I won't do that because I fear that loss of control. And sometimes I think to myself, you should just find somebody with DMT and smoke the hell out of it, and that'll cure you. There's your complete loss of control. But again, I think that is my biggest fear when it comes to this, is the loss of control. Mm-hmm. I need to learn to go with the flow. I need to learn to let go.
Do you think that's why you talk about it publicly? Do you think that that's a form of control?
Yeah. Yeah, probably. It's therapeutic to me to be able to talk about some of this stuff and not have people, look at you sideways. But I think it's that, and I think I'm also looking for somebody to tell me a direction to go, because I'm kind of at this spot where I just don't know what I'm doing with this stuff anymore. And in a lot of ways, I know we just started this show. The third episode. I hate to say that, by and large, with a lot of the cases that I see come across my desk and a lot of pictures I get, I'm uninterested in it. I'm just not as driven in the interest of it anymore like I used to be. I've got a stack of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 high 8 tapes to go through, hopefully before the weekend is gone. And I'm real nonplussed about even looking at it.
So you're saying our vacation at Paratopia may come to an end sooner?
No, not at all. It's just, I think I'm going in a completely different direction from analyzing data and reports and all of that. I've done that. It's like, I'm done with that now. I just don't feel the need to keep harping on that, because I think that comes from a time where people are asking, is it real? I'm tired of that. I'm burned out on that. I'm tired of those arguments,
Yeah, I am too. But I also almost wonder if what I'm not doing, because I share similar sentiments, is approaching this from all these various angles, so that eventually I'll get sick of it and sit with it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost me taking my own advice of just shutting up. It's like, well, but I'm not done screaming from all these different directions yet. Yeah. And then once I am, then I'll just sit with it and see what happens.
The other option for me is to go to a psychologist.
Yes.
Boy, there's a notebook full right there. That's my other thing is I've got this control issue, and obviously, it's a problem. And maybe I should go talk to somebody about that and get some advice on how do you deal with that? What do you do?
Yeah, tell them about the floating arm. I think they'll enjoy that.
Yeah, they'll lock me up. So no, I'm not doing that. But but it had a flannel shirt on.
Psychologists hate you for your freedoms.
Right. Exactly. So, I think it's all about working on yourself at this point to further this. And again, maybe that's another part of it too, is, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. In order to...
How far away is this, all of what we're talking about, from a spiritual discussion? We're talking about paths, we're talking about this, sort of in control of what we need to do, or informing what we need to do. We're talking about, when my big supposed enlightened experience happened, it's a matter of just giving up for the sake of giving up after having concentrated on a long time. Mm-hmm. It's all the same. It's the same mechanism in play here. What the fuck are we talking about?
We're never going to have a family show if you use language like that.
The circle, she is complete.
Yes. I go back to again, what I used to say to people back in the old days, because, when I was hosting chats on AOL, I don't care what UFO case the subject that the chat was about that night, because we'd focus on one case or one place or a hot spot or whatever, one aspect of ufology. And invariably by, if the chat started at 8, by 10 o'clock, it was all about God. That's what we were talking about. Every chat always ended up there. And somebody asked me one time, it was a good friend of mine, which I recently connected with in email again. He used to come to a lot of my chats way back when. And he made mention, he's like, why do you think that all this stuff always descends into like a religious tone about it? I said, because largely it's always going to be an article of faith, because we really don't have any evidence of this. We don't have any more than any religion has. So you've got that aspect of it. And then you've got, a guy who I think, in my opinion, despite his detractors, I think Strieber has gushed it out for everybody to see in how he's perceived this experience and how he feels about it. And you've got him saying a guidance is there, or a push or a direction is set out. You've got a scientist here tonight that has said, that he feels he was set on some kind of path by virtue of an experience. I think that speaks a lot to, people who would turn it into an ideology, and it's not that, it's an experience. And, does it have similar spiritual connectivity? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, why are we so afraid to say that?
Well, simply because this stuff has been co-opted by religion and New Age and belief systems and all of that.
Yeah, sure. But there's a component to it like that, and we can't ignore that. No more than we can ignore the high strangeness stuff and the way we've kind of pushed to get that out there.
Right. Well, I think it's because the majority of people, at least in the West, have this belief system that everything has to be equal and valid in this. And so if you're going to talk about this, the spiritual component of this, then the person who comes up to you and says reptilians in the garden of good and evil, or whatever, is equally valid to what we're talking about. You know what I mean? And That's not true. They're not equal in weight, in substance. But just try telling them that. You know what I mean? And I think that's just a flaw of where we are as a society in being so freaking wishy-washy on... Because once you say, we don't know what's real, I think the thing that's unacknowledged is that we're talking about that on a different level than sort of the mundane... delusions or wish fulfillment and all that sort of stuff. There are different levels. There are different levels to that thinking in terms of, what's reality. And they're not all the same. They're not all on the same level, I guess what I'm saying. Right. So it's like Ken Wilber does in his work, which is to take all of the wisdom traditions, all of the religions, psychology, philosophy, and science, and to, most especially with the religions and probably with psychology, to whittle away all of the crap and get to what is real or what is universal in them.
Right.
And that's the process of transcending and including. You transcend the level below you, but you also include it in you, and you the thing that you include are the good parts that work. The rest of it you get rid of. So in terms of...
shape-shifting aliens and...
Shape-shifting aliens and all that stuff. Yeah, let's get rid of that.
Well, and I have to say this, and you may kick my teeth in for this, but here's the thing. When you start hearing people talk like that, I think the one thing that I learned from being in the couple of experiencer support groups that were out there was that no matter how bizarre or how stupid some of these accounts sound, are some of them complete shit? Absolutely. Some of them were just made up stories to for whatever purpose that there is for someone to make something like that up. But I think that there are certain stories like that out there that just seem so absolutely absurd and ridiculous that that person, that is genuinely what they perceived. The problem is that they're taking that at face value. They're taking that and they're saying, this is what it is, this is how it is, and that's just not the case. They haven't reached that point where they're questioning their perceptions. They are taking their perceptions at absolute face value. And again, I keep reiterating the multi-level experience. Right now, they're at that top surface level, and they can't seem to get past that because they're content to hold on to that answer.
Well, okay, then can we then at least agree to get rid of being married to our interpretations of what these things are, so that we're not walking away saying, well, I saw a reptilian shapeshifter, therefore all that stuff about, that I've read about reptilians in the Garden of, Eden is true, or, these
Sure.
aliens definitely made us in a test tube and they're God,
Right.
or,
Yeah.
any of that stuff. They're from the Pleiades, whatever it is.
Right.
Any of the
Yes.
interpretive stuff, can we get rid of that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that we have to have, I think a lot of people have to have the fortitude to say, that I think it's pretty well established at this point that your perceptions are greatly altered around these people. And that could be something that they're doing or a byproduct of being around them. I've always said they're very hard to be around. But we need to start saying to these people, you need to look deeper into this experience than what you're seeing on the surface, because that's not it. You're not buying shoes on the mothership, that, and I use that analogy because that was one person that I met that just believed that wholeheartedly. And when I asked her, well, where are the shoes? I just got this blank stare like, oh, well, I think we have to be able, and people have to be able to let go of that kind of notion that this is what it is. You have to look deeper into the phenomena and the experience itself to understand a little bit more about how it might work for you. It's all very subjective in a lot of ways until it's outwardly manifested. And even then, it's subjective for some people.
And even then, don't go to the books looking for any pat answers.
No, don't. Just look. Just look.
Take it all in, and what makes, if anything makes most objective sense, think about that, not, hey, what backs up my belief system? Hey, what appeals to me about this? No. What do you, in your heart of hearts, cut the crap with yourself.
Right.
and think, does this really make sense for everybody?
Right.
Because if it doesn't, then that's not going to be it.
Who was it that said, don't give way to amazement, just look at what we're showing you? Right? I think that is what people should do, is just look at what's being shown. Look at what is presenting itself to you and stop trying to make it fit into some box, even though that's the nature of a human being, is to try to make sense of it. Take in your experience and don't try to attribute anything to it. Just look at what it happens to show you. And then relate that as best you can. Honestly, with all of even the really dumb stuff, even the stuff that is so bizarre that you don't ever want to talk about it. I've talked to you about them trying to stick vibrating jelly in my mouth. What the hell is that?
Delicious.
Do I necessarily believe that? No. I think a lot of stuff is symbolic. What does that mean? I don't know. It may make sense to me someday. Right now, it's not. But and I do look at a lot of it as symbolic. So I think people need to let go of their preconceived notions of all of this stuff, and we need to start over. We went grossly awry in this field. and it's time to like really step back and say, okay, let's forget all this spacemen trapping crap, and let's forget the religious stuff as much as you can, and let's forget the scientific. It can't possibly be, therefore it isn't. Let's just experience what's there and relate it openly and honestly, and stop leaving out the shit that you think no one's going to believe. Because the whole thing is unbelievable.
I would like to have Seth Shostak or one of those guys, one of the big skeptic guys on here, maybe Dr. whatever the hell his name is, Dr. Science, Mr. Science.
Oh, Bill
Mr.
Nye.
Show. Yeah, Bill Nye the Science Guy, that's his name.
Yeah, he needs to bring his breaking powder and vinegar if he's going to explain anything to us.
Well, I would love to have him on here and just one of those guys, any of those skeptics, and just say, all right, what conversation can we have in an hour where by the end of it, you will take me seriously? I would like to have the discussion. I mean, is it possible for us and Joe Science to have that discussion, or is Matloff the exception to the rule? This is what I'd like to discover.
I think we should get
even with the skeptics. Can we sway them in some way that we're actually just human beings trying to figure this stuff out and don't have an agenda and we're not loons? Is that possible?
I don't know. I think we should try to get Penn Jillette.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, of course, he's absurdly critical of all of the paranormal stuff. But I think that, I keep going back to conversations I had with Russ Estes like a long time ago, and there was a guy that was really into the UFO field, really into research. I didn't know of a better guy researching at the time. Really thorough, exposed a lot of people as complete bullshit artists. But, I asked him one time, I said, do you think there is something really going on with this phenomena or not? And he says, well, I think there is. I said, well, then explain to me what happened to me. And he said, have you ever seen the movie Phenomenon with John Travolta? And I said, no. And he says, well, that's what I think is going on. So I'd watched that movie and I thought, I've got a brain tumor? That's what it is? But I think what he was trying to say is that it's an internally generated thing. And I think that would be the answer that a great many skeptic would say to you. If they took you seriously, they would say it is some sort of internally generated phenomena that you are experiencing that is part of your human experience. And
that you share with friends and family?
Well, there's the tripping stone, isn't it? That's the point where I think everything goes south, is when everybody else sees this stuff too. Then again, they could say, you're influencing them to see something. You're by virtue of the discussion, you're influencing what they're seeing, and any little thing they see is going to be validating to what you claim you've seen. It goes on and on like that with these people. And you've got a guy like, just for instance, James Oberg with NASA. He's a very intelligent man. But when I wrote him many years ago, I wrote him after seeing him, I think it was on Sightings or something like that, where they were talking to astronauts about what they had seen in space. And he, basically explained away a lot of what they claimed to have seen. And then went back to the astronauts again. I think Story Musgrave was the guy they were talking to. And I think that's who they were talking. I'm not completely positive, but I'll use him as, I'll say Astronaut X, Astronaut X said he saw this while in space and he couldn't explain it. He believes that there's life out there, even in the vacuum of space. And Oberg said, no, it's ice crystals, or it's debris from the shuttle, or it's this, that, and the other. And I wrote him and I said, I'd like to know how it is that these people have been in space, have been in that environment, and have seen things that they can't explain, but yet you're able to explain them, and you've never been in space, and you've never been orbiting the planet out there in this, and they have. How do you justify your opinion to question or to doubt what they say they've seen? And I kid you not, I wish I still had the email. I don't even have the same computer. That's 4 computers ago or more. He said, well, Astronaut X is known as an experiencer of space travel. In other words, to say he just is a little flighty was the way I took it. He doesn't really he's not super critical in the way he thinks about this stuff, and he didn't see what he thought he saw, and he's known as a real experiencer of these things. And not saying experiencer in the way we think of it, saying it in the aspect of being the way I took it, always giving into the awe of it all, you know. Mm-hmm. And I took that as meaning not critical. And, you know, and the letter I wrote him was pretty nasty initially. And we exchanged a couple more emails after that, but I never really got a good answer. And I think it's largely because these people don't have a good answer for that. I don't think that you can have a meaningful conversation with someone who already has their mind made up that we're all either mentally ill or didn't see what we thought we saw, or we're just primed for something to happen. And we see a shooting star and immediately say, well, there's been a UFO crash in my area. I don't think it's possible to have that kind of conversation with them because they're just not willing to entertain it in any way. Mm-hmm. I think that ultimately is the problem. I said on another message board to a young lady asking about skeptics, I said, I personally would like to see, they're always talking about, well, let's do a psychological workup on UFO experiencers. I'd like to see one done on skeptics, especially those fundamentalist types. Who are, so rooted in it can't be possible because I've never seen it and I've never experienced it, so therefore it can't possibly exist. What kind of I wrote on my site not long ago that I think these people are in some way trying to elevate their own intelligence past what they see us as being these doe-eyed believers. I think that they are just, I think it does something for their own personal stature or ego to say, no, this is what you saw, this is how it is, and I'm explaining it to the world because you're just off in la-la land. That involves I'm sure it involves a certain amount of a feeling of superiority and power.
Well, how is that different than what we're doing?
Because I think that we're being intellectually honest. I don't see how a man can sit on Larry King and tell a man who actually touched an unknown object with cryptic writing across it, who saw it lift up above the trees in front of his face and zoom away at an unheard of speed, that he was looking at a lighthouse. That's not intellectually honest. That's a joke. Give me a break. That's just, how foolish do you have to be to even suggest something like that? Mm-hmm. I'm not here suggesting anything other than there is some kind of anomalous thing going on. We don't know what it is, but it's got an inherent reality to it because I think enough people around me have seen it, and that's been my experience. That's all I've got is my experience. I have no proof of anything. And truthfully, I'm not in this for anybody else. I'm glad to share it all, and if it helps somebody, that's great. But I'm in this for me. I make no bones about it. And if I wasn't learning things about it, I probably wouldn't be interested anymore. I'm
also in this for you.
Jared, just sorry to interrupt, but is that a hatch?
Where?
Right behind us.
You mean the hatch that says hatch in glowing safety orange paint?
No, the one next to it.
No, I don't see anything next to it.
You're a freaking idiot. Yes, that hatch.
Oh, what about it?
That's our ticket out of here, dude.
How do you know?
The only one way to find out, right?
Yeah, by opening this door and asking someone who works here when we leave.
How did I miss that door?
Now who's the...
Holy shit! Chair! 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 Chair!
I'm okay!
Dude, that was like the Wile E. Coyote, what you just did.
Dude, that was awesome! You gotta try it!
Well, is there a way out?
I don't see one, but we'll worry about that later.
Why would we worry about that later and not now?
Just jump!
Plus, there's a hatch.
Don't be a pussy! Cat, jump! Yeah, I did that joke again. We're on vacation! Woohoo, yeah, dumb things! Woo! Now, come on!
No, that's stupid. I'm not a frat boy. Woo! I'm not going to peer pressure because you made it sound like mindless fun. What?
Jeff!
What?
I have an idea, but I'll need your help. This isn't seawater down here, I think it's Kool-Aid. Jeff, dive in here and we'll drink our way out.
What about the hatch?
Forget the hatch, man, come on! What's the hatch ever done for you, huh? Did that hatch go on vacation with you, huh? Did that hatch listen to you when you needed a friend? Did it wipe your ass when you needed your ass wiped that time that you couldn't wipe it? Will it catch you when you fall, Jeff? Will it?
No, you have a point. A very stupid, moronic point.
Did I mention it's Kool-Aid?
Is it spiked?
I think so.
Well, I do like beverages. I regret it!
Wow, Jeff. Looks like you really fell for that.
Okay, less talking, more drinking.
Will Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaeni ever figure anything out at all ever and get off this stinking island called Paratopia? Magic 8 Ball says... Doubtful. Yeah, it's doubtful.
Dude, that was like the Wile E. Coyote, what you just did.